the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge, where I went 0 for 2 last week, as the Celtics and Nuggets couldn't really even come close to pulling through this weekend. But it is what it is. We've got an NBA Final Four. That's a pretty great place to start on bettoredge.com. Use code SPOTTRAC, SPOTRAC. Get yourself $20. Find a friend, throw it out to the public. Take a stab at how the Final Four in this 2025 postseason is going to play out. Again, that's bettoredge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, May 19th. A little bit of everything today. It's going to be a Spot Track six-pack. Derrick Henry leads off because we have some firm details on his 2-year, $30 million extension with the Baltimore Ravens. That includes, as previously reported, $14 million this year, $11 million next year. It's all pretty simple stuff. Base salary, signing bonus, option bonus, and everything over the next 2 years is fully 100% guaranteed at signing, just as we'd like it. And that means he went from $7 million non-guaranteed to $25 million fully guaranteed. That's how you do it. That's what it's all about at this position. It's about, we know this thing isn't going to look at 4 or 5 years anymore for the running backs. It's just not going to happen. But how much can you secure over the next 2 seasons when your maximum value and your worth and your production to this team is as good as it's going to get? And I realize I'm saying that about a 30-year-old, but what else is there to say? He maxed out his incentives. He helped lead that team deep into the postseason, and the expectation is that that's exactly how 2025 and 26 will go as well. They saved about $4.4 million on the cap per this extension. We told you that was a big part of this. And again, Henry goes from $7 million to $14 million this year cash-wise, while tacking on a fully guaranteed 2026 as well. So as advertised, I imagine there's a couple of incentives built into this thing. We have to see the full breakdown in the coming days here, and we'll re-report that, put that out to the socials. But for now, kind of as expected. And that's a great thing for this position that just needs baby steps and sometimes big swings like we've seen with Barkley and now Henry over the past couple of months here. Brock Purdy, not too much to say just yet because the only thing to say hasn't yet been uncovered. And that deal isn't officially processed. I had a quick email exchange with the agent as of yesterday. We're getting there. He expects that to be done by the end of the week. I sure hope it's before that, but hopefully this time Thursday when I'm talking with Brandon, I've got a lot more to talk to right now. But look, the surfacey numbers are certainly marketable. All right. And I've kind of limped into this on the socials with how I've reported some of this stuff because, like I mentioned, until we know how these guarantees and the report is 181, until we know how those are sliced up, just how much of that is fully guaranteed right now. And I have a feeling that's going to be a big number of contention. And just how practical that 181 is over the next, I would imagine, 3.5 to 4 seasons, because this is now a 6-year contract where he had $5.5 million carrying over from his rookie deal and $265 over the 5 years of new money, new years on this extension. So the 49ers officially pulled the trigger. Did they max it out? Well, there's 2 ways to look at this. And again, I'm not going to dive too deep until I have absolutely everything in front of me. But I can put it this way. I can give you the surface numbers, the 265, the 181. That's $53 million a year in terms of the new money. If the 181 is over 3 years and it's fully guaranteed, that would be wild, first of all. Because I can tell you right now, I'm looking at the guarantee at sign numbers, and it's Watson at 230 and Josh Allen at 147, and that's it. Like that's the fake number and the real number, if you want to look at it that way. So 147 is the guarantee at sign to beat. There's no chance that Brock Purdy's 181 is in that conversation, or the sports world, the sports financial world will literally blow up in our faces. So let's just all assume, for rational reasons, that that's not the number at signing. But then where is it? Because the $53 million a year is a bit down the ranks, right? In terms of the new money APY. Certainly Dak at 60 is still the breadwinner here, but the 53 and change is tied for 7th with Jared Goff. But Tua is ahead of him. Trevor Lawrence is ahead of him. Josh Allen's new deal. Jordan Love, Burrow, and Dak Prescott. Who did Brock Purdy step in ahead of? That would be Lamar Jackson, Super Bowl winning quarterback Jalen Hurts. And then we dip back into the 40s per year, which are, somewhat antiquated contracts. But that's how the 53 sort of looks over the grand scheme of things. Now, let's flip the switch on that to the percent of that APY. So the 53 million right now in a 2025 climate, right, where the salary cap is excessively higher than it was in any other year, 279.2. What percentage of Brock Purdy's APY versus that cap ranks among these other contracts we're talking about? Well, that number is 14th. Okay, Brock Purdy's APY percentage is just under 19%. Burrow at 24 and change has been the leader since he signed that contract. Nobody's really even come close to his percent APY. But now he's behind many of the names I just mentioned, right? So it's Burrow, Prescott, Herbert, Lamar, and Patrick Mahomes. That's your top 5 in percent of APY versus the salary cap in the year that the contract was signed. So quite a few ticks lower down the ladder here when we look at it that way. So, that's a long way of saying when you adjust for cap inflation, which is what we're saying, Purdy's the 14th highest average paid quarterback on the active books. That feels better, I think, for a lot of you out there who maybe even root for the 49ers and are freaking out about this contract looking like this, smelling like this, maybe even happening at all, because it's tough to get out the back of your mind where this guy came from, which was a lower level college. He was the last pick in the draft, and he sort of covered up the gap that was Trey Lance and became a playoff winning quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers on the heels of, doing this with Jimmy Garoppolo, where the same questions exist, and et cetera. So I get it. We've flip-flopped quite a bit with this conversation, but this is my takeaway without, again, having the guarantees to break down for you here. When you look at it this way, in terms of the percentages, I think it's exactly where it's supposed to be. All right, this is a Kirk Cousins Atlanta contract. This is a Derek Carr New Orleans contract adjusted for cap and adjusted for age. So he's slightly ahead of aging veteran starting quarterback contracts. And that's perfect. He's slightly behind Jared Goff, who's in the middle, right? He's a little older than Purdy, more successful than Purdy, a lot more successful than Purdy, not yet as old as Cousins and Carr. So he slots in between those two variables. Now, he's behind Tua, he's behind Lawrence, he's behind Love, and the list goes on, Hurts and Murray, and certainly the elites that we've mentioned before. So there's a lot of people, when you look at it from this perspective, that have stronger contracts on an annual average basis than Brock Purdy does based on the 2025 financial climate of the NFL. It's just fine. And I don't think anybody has to freak out yet, but I can't conclusively say that to you until I know just how easy it's going to be for him to earn a 181. And the only reason I'm leaving it open-ended that way is if the 181 is 120 guaranteed today over the next 2 seasons, and then the remaining 61 million kicks in March of 2026, which makes all 181 practical over the next 3 years, that's an over $60 million adjusted guaranteed APY, which is aggressive, which means we're in big boy conversations here. Now, if it's those 3 seasons and then an absolute line in the sand, the 49ers can walk away from this thing, despite the fact that option bonuses are probably going to have loaded up dead cap. But if that's the case, where they're saying we're going to aggressively front load 181 million over the next 3 years, by the way, like they did with the Garoppolo contract to a certain degree, because we're more concerned about being able to get out in year 4 than we are about saving a couple of dollars today. If that was the mindset, and that's how and why this contract was signed much sooner than I thought it was going to be done, I can understand that. because it's not our money and they're making billions. And this is the most important position. And they seem to like this kid quite a bit. And for, rightfully so for the most part. So they're putting their chips in, hypothetically speaking, on this kid, at least holding down the fort at $60 million a year cash wise for the next 3 seasons. I'm not saying that's where this thing lands, but there have been some loose reports that this 181 is over the next 3 seasons and that it's got some kind of mechanisms to basically become practical. So we'll see when we get there, but that's just sort of my little foreshadowing moment. If and when we get to that point, it's aggressive, but again, don't freak out because all it means is the compromise most likely is we're going to pay you a boatload of cash, maybe more than we definitely should be doing right now, and more than probably any other team would ever offer you. But we just want to be able to break ties if we need to. And that's a terrible way to look at this position, but you can understand with the mess that's happening in New Orleans and Atlanta with Cousins and what just happened in Denver with Russell. And, that list is growing and growing. So pay a little extra for a little bit less pain if and when you have to move on from this thing. We'll see if that's exactly how this contract was structured. Scottie Scheffler, a name that just won't go away. And that's with good reason. He's the best golfer on earth. And there's just no other way to slice this. You can say there's more talented golfers, guys who hit longer, guys who putt better. But when you put the 5 tools all together and you include clutch and overcoming, and I mean, you can make all the jokes you want about how this guy was in jail a year ago and then damn near turned around and won that tournament, but did turn around and win this one. It's just there's just too many variables in place to not say definitively at this point that everybody else is just playing for second. He takes in $3.4 million for winning the PGA Championship yesterday, kind of in convincing fashion, though. He somewhat looked a little sloppy on Sunday. He's now made over $10 million on the course in 2025, and he's now made just under $147 million in his professional golf career, starting to really climb those ranks, all of which are available on SpotTrack under our PGA, under the golf tab, and then the PGA tab as well. And I know, by the way, if you haven't checked out that part of our site, we do give you the ability to obviously see the LIV and see the PGA in their own categories, in their own containers, but also players that have crossed over. We've got full earning reports for those players. We also have the ability to just see earnings based on these majors. So just how much money and the finishes associated with it players have had at the 4 majors within professional golf, because that's obviously how things are being treated. There's a PGA league, there's a LIV league, and the majors stand isolated as their own entities where both players from both of those pots come together. So we've started to track things differently, and Scott Allen has done a really nice job of sort of figuring out the minutiae of how things are going to go. So you can see a PGA earnings, you can see an overall earnings in terms of like match play and majors, and the same with the LIV players. So Scottie climbing the ranks pretty much in every regard, including major wins, overall wins, and his foothold as, I think, definitively the golfer of this current generation. The Dodgers. Here's one I didn't see coming. All we've talked about is them adding and spending and doing all these things that are bad for baseball. Well, they're winning ball games and they're doing just fine. If I quickly look at the standings, I'm going to tell you that they're in first place, and I'm going to look how much they're in first place by. It's just one game. All right. We warned you in the preview, Dan Selman and I, that this division was going to be fun, and it's remained fun. The Padres and Giants are 1 game behind the Dodgers, and the Diamondbacks are 4 games behind. And all these teams have their own version of injuries and letdowns, but they're going to beat each other up here a little bit. So the 29-18 Dodgers made a pretty significant move yesterday, kind of moving on from one of their linchpin winning pieces in Chris Taylor, who, man, that was one of those contracts where you said, all right, maybe baseball's still kind of messed up financially, because yes, this was a glue guy. Yes, this was a utility guy, but for Chris Taylor to secure $60 million over 4 years, just didn't feel great at the time, especially because he was returning to the Dodgers. That wasn't an overpay on free agency by a team that's just looking for any kind of momentum at that point. It was the best team retaining a player that wasn't vital, but was obviously helping in a huge way back in 2022 when the contract hit. Well, we're at the line of demarcation with that, as Chris Taylor has been released from the Dodgers. He had $9 million remaining on his salary for 2025. That's obviously getting paid out. Then there was a $4 million buyout on a team option for next year. So he's walking away, with $17 million total in 2025. When you talk about the salary for this year and the buyout for next year, that all sort of accelerates here. And he's free to sign somewhere else on what would be a prorated minimum. And I can tell you right now, that's looking like $540,000 for the rest of the year. So has he been a great player? No. Has he been a good player? He's missed a lot of time, and he's been benched, quite frankly, because this guy Tommy Edman showed up from St. Louis last year and basically took his spot and a lot of starting spots and a major piece of the batting order as well. So, the writing was on the wall with this, but injuries have piled up a little bit here, and we'll see if this guy can be a contributor anywhere else. I can tell you right now, at $540,000, there's going to be somebody, if not multiple teams, willing to at least take a chance to revive this guy's career. 34 and a half years old, by the way, heading into the spring and summer months. The Denver Nuggets bounced out of the Game 7 by the Oklahoma City Thunder in convincing fashion. Now turn to the offseason, and it's a notable one. And it was going to be notable as of a month ago when they fired their head coach and their GM, and the writing was on the wall there that big change was coming. Just how big of change remains to be seen. We'll certainly have Keith Smith talking Denver and Boston in a couple of days here, both for the site elsewhere. But just on the surface, here's how things break down. Jokic, going nowhere, of course, has 2 years and $114 million left plus a player option. You probably start talking about an extension with him now. Maybe it doesn't happen until next season. Off season, we'll see what Keith has to say about how the mathematics work in that. But that's an untouchable, untradeable name. It's about what do we do around him, not what do we do with Jokic. Jamal Murray, different conversation, but 4 years, $207 million. That extension kicks in 2025. So there's 4 fully guaranteed years to go here. And that's not going to be easy. He's a great player. He's an exceptional player at times. He hides away at times. 67 games played this year. That's the most he's played since 2018. That's a good sign. Kind of a bit of a ghost a little bit here in the postseason. But we'll see. That's not a player that I don't think anybody has a pulse on. We'll be moving on this offseason. So it's about Jokic and Murray, and then who else? Gordon's the who else. I think those are the big three. Nobody anticipates, especially because Gordon became the second most important player on this roster down the stretch and even through this OKC series. And you could tell that he was certainly hampered in Game 7, and that was a big part of why Denver was blown off the court by about 25 points. So Gordon, significant contract remaining, 3 for $89 plus a player option. He's 29 years old. He's about to hit that 30 mark. So we're talking through these 3 guaranteed years, he'll be 32, 33 at that point in time. Maybe they can get the player option to kick in and keep this guy around for the balance of what would be the rest of this Jokic contract and then the first couple of seasons of his next contract, because that seems to be a really nice yin and yang fit there. Michael Porter Jr., that's the name. And, I think the idea of trading him has been around for 2 off seasons now, at least. This will be the 3rd. And while there will be significant interest in moving Michael Porter, I just don't know how much interest there'll be in acquiring Michael Porter Jr., especially on 2 years, $79 million fully guaranteed. And none of this with options, none of this with any sort of kickers. Some of 2026 was partially guaranteed. There's a world where a $17 million of that number can be negated at some point in time, which could help both the Nuggets and an acquiring team. And that's certainly something that we're going to want to talk to Keith about here, because if this can look like a 1.5 year deal instead of 2 years at $79 million fully guaranteed, you can probably get somebody like a Detroit or an Orlando to talk themselves into this. Those teams that fringe feel like they're just a shooter away, despite the fact that Porter is such a hot and cold player at times. But that's the name, right? That's the starting point with this team. How can we at least recycle his role somehow, if not take a hit? And are they sending picks out? Are they sending players out with him? Again, the aprons make this complicated. So not that I want any of you to go out there and start to read the CBA, but we will have Keith on quite a bit here to be that mouthpiece for just how hard some of these moves are going to be, both from a basketball standpoint and from a CBA apron tax cap standpoint, because both those conversations have to come together to actually get these kind of transactions done anymore. But Porter Jr. is the name. And then we start talking about, a really cheap Russell Westbrook player option, $3.5 million. He probably picks it up. I think he's enjoying his time there. Dario Saric, $5.5 million. Same thing. Role players that probably had too much of a role at times. But the big ad in 2025 in terms of contracts will be Christian Braun, who in a perfect world became one of the third or fourth best options on this roster and might be asked to do more if Porter Jr. is moved off for lesser players. He's a rookie extension eligible. That's a no-brainer in my opinion. I think he is a fixture on this team going forward. He seems to have a really nice chemistry connection with Jokic. What else matters? He's extension eligible as of this offseason. I guarantee you Keith will have him down as a yes. It's just how much, because we're in that world right now with Denver where they're pot committed, one of the higher tax teams, one of the higher cash teams in all of basketball. And I think they overachieved through this postseason. There's no question about that, especially with the coaching disrest at the end of the season. But they're going to be adding, not subtracting to this roster from a financial standpoint, both to fill some holes, both to improve around Jokic, and obviously to extend Christian Braun for the 2026 season as well. So that's a team that, from a basketball standpoint, I think had a really nice outcome, but it only makes things harder for a bunch of reasons, a few of which I laid out here, and many more, which Keith will get to in the coming days and weeks. And finally, how about some hockey talk? The Toronto Maple Leafs were bounced from Game 7 emphatically by the Florida Panthers, by a familiar foe in Brad Marchand. You've heard all those stories, I'm sure, if you follow sports as a whole. They also carry the arguably the top free agent in the NHL this offseason in Mitch Marner. And it seems like, despite the fact that I think they had a pretty nice run here, they didn't get the job done in the postseason. And it seems like there's probably too many hats in the locker room at this point in time. They do have significant contracts on the books for Austin Matthews and William Nylander, of course. A couple of defensemen locked up through 2029 and Jake McCabe, Morgan Riley. For those who follow this stuff, these names. It seems reckless to add a huge contract for Mitch Marner, despite the fact that he might be the best playmaker on this team. And you have to imagine, despite the fact that hockey has percentage maxes and all this, but the cap is rising, you have to imagine that multiple teams are going to max out Mitch Marner in free agency this offseason. And that will range from contenders to teams at the bottom just looking for their number one guy, looking for a number one guy to start to rebuild around. That would be teams like Detroit, Chicago, to go with Connor Bedard, of course. And how about that Utah franchise that is just getting going and would love to take away the stigma that was the Arizona franchise and bring in a name that really becomes the face of the Utah Mammoth, which is now the name of that team going forward. However, we've got teams like Carolina and the Rangers, and to some degree, some of these teams that are still involved here that will get involved in free agency, because this is one thing that's great about the NHL. And to some degree, the NBA is like this because of the way that their trades can work throughout free agency. But big free agents don't necessarily sign with terrible teams in this league. They just don't. It's not how it works. It's why the game has so little parity at times. It's why the draft is so important in the NHL for a number of reasons, but this being the biggest one. But when guys get to free agency, the prices are sort of irrelevant because similar to basketball, there's a max. And there's sort of a hierarchy in terms of positionally, kind of what the number will be player to player. So it's not so much about who's going to, mightily overpay for a player like Mitch Marner It's where does Mitch Marner want to be? And if there's 3 or 4 teams and one of them went to the conference finals last year and one of them was done by, the trade deadline last year, well, you might imagine. Now, proximity is a big deal. Family life, home life is a big deal. Taxation is a huge deal because of the fact that these salaries aren't exactly jumping off the page in comparison to other sports. So there are factors, and there are factors that will take Canada out of it for some people. And there are factors that will take New York out of it for some people and California out of it for some people, and bring the Texas teams and the Florida teams and the Vegas teams into bigger focus because of their tax situation and their standard of living as well. But don't be surprised if Toronto is still very much in, because they are a team that likes to run it back and for a lot of reasons, but also because this might be the best team making a good offer for Mitch Marner. It just might. And generally speaking, that's how things shake out in the end for the NHL free agency. All the NHL free agency stuff is updated on Spot Track. You can view restricted free agents. We'll see if we get an offer sheet or two this year. Full unrestricted free agents, extension candidates have got years of experience all updated for things like that. And we're ready to roll in terms of turning a new leaf with a bunch of these players, dozens of players, as we get down to the Final Four in the NHL as well. All right. Hopefully more on that Brock Purdy contract by Thursday. Certainly more across the NFL landscape as mini camps and all that have rounded up. We've got tons of extension candidates out there still, right? Micah Parsons is the one to watch. Fred Warner in San Francisco has had some rumors recently over the past couple of days that he's going to stick around along with Brock Purdy for the long haul here. And obviously we're on Aaron Rodgers watch with the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. Visit bettoredge.com today. Use code SPOTTREK, get $20 off. You can bet on all of these things we're talking about. All these playoff series, some of the off-season stuff, and some NFL futures as well now that the schedule's been released, the draft is in place, and there's a lot more information in our hands. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot Track Podcast.